You're listening to the Future Tech Health Podcast with Richard Jacobs. Until I reached age 40, I never realized the obvious, that we all have medical issues, or we at least have a family member or close relation that had, has, or will have them in the future. Medicine and biological systems are the final frontier. Until we've conquered death, figured out how life began, cured cancer, and understood our purpose in the universe, there's a heck of a lot to talk about when it comes to our health. Future Tech Health means I'll be covering futuristic topics that are actually already in clinical trials, or even starting to appear on shelves or by prescription, or available for your own use. We dive deep into stem cells, CRISPR-Cas9, the science of sleep, epigenetics, medical testing, cancer, ketogenic diets, stem cells, aging, regenerative medicine, and more. My goal for you, the listener, is to learn from these podcasts. You may very well learn something that may change the course of your life for the better, steer you towards a new career, or give you insight into addressing a serious medical problem. Remember, however, this podcast and its content is informational in nature only. No medical, tax, legal, financial, or psychological advice is being given. If you enjoy the podcast, please listen, subscribe, like, and share it with friends. Thank you. Hello, this is Richard Jacobs with the Future Tech and Future Tech Health podcasts, and I have Michael Howell. He's the co-founder of the Sleep Performance Institute. So, Mike, thanks for coming. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for inviting me, Rich.
Yeah, tell me, what was the basis behind founding the Sleep Performance Institute? What motivated you?
Well, I've been practicing sleep medicine for a lot of years and realized that there's not enough of me or my colleagues to go around to take care of everybody who needs help sleeping. Poor sleep is pervasive in our culture. Sleep is thought of as being dispensable, I should say, but it has consequences. Consequences range from motor vehicle accidents to breast cancer. And I think most people realize this. They realize that they would like to sleep better, but oftentimes they would never consider their sleep challenges serious enough to see a sleep doctor. And all they need is a little bit of wisdom, knowledge transfer to kind of understand what is the nature of their sleep challenges and how to fix it.
Yeah, I think it's hard because society has all these, things that they teach you or they put at you. Like if you get up late and you go to bed late, you're a bad person. It's better
Right.
the early bird gets the worm, or if, you're not sleeping well, then you're a sissy or something, if you needed a lot of sleep. I mean, I think all those things play into people maybe not taking sleep as seriously as they should.
I agree with everything you just said. One exception to that are athletes, professional athletes, Olympic athletes have for a long time have recognized the value of sleep and consider it as important as physical training and nutrition. Just a couple of examples. Tom Brady, who just won his record-setting 6 Super Bowl, values sleep greatly. LeBron James values sleep greatly. And in many ways, they consider sleep the extra edge that has, prolonged their careers for much of their career.
So, do you work with people that just are having problems sleeping, or do you work with athletes and people that want to get like amazing sleep, optimized sleep?
Well, what the Sleep Performance Institute does is it helps organizations. So if you have a law firm, an accounting firm, a corporation, you're more likely than not, your employees are not sleeping well, and that is having consequences on your organization's performance. And it clearly applies for athletic teams. So we give we do consulting services and sleep training for athletes and non-athletes alike.
So when you say a lot of people are not sleeping, I don't know the word you used, well or good enough or anything. I mean, how bad is the average person's sleep, and what makes it bad? And maybe give a few details on the average.
Sure. Well, there's a reason why there's a coffee shop on every corner in the industrialized world, and it's not because everybody loves the taste. It's they're self-medicating. Caffeine is the most commonly consumed drug on the planet, and this is because, in large part, our sleep isn't very good. People go to bed late, they wake up early. The light they're exposed to manipulates their body's 24-hour clock. That's their circadian rhythm. And so when they lay down and go to bed, they have trouble falling asleep. And then when they get up in the morning, they have trouble waking up in the morning because they could sleep a lot longer. This mistiming of sleep is as important as not getting enough, meaning they're just trying to do it outside of their natural window. In addition to that, 75% of people describe some sort of sleep complaint. That could be insomnia, sleep apnea. It could just be a bed partner who snores. It could be a new baby at home that's keeping them awake. There's all sorts of various sleep challenges.
What about chronotype? Do you believe there are chronotypes, and how extreme have you seen them be where it's still healthy?
Right. Yeah. So chronotype indicates what is your natural circadian rhythm, and absolutely, people vary in terms of their body's natural circadian rhythm on when they would most like to fall asleep and when they would most like to wake up. Think about, I always try to take it back to how we evolved. We evolved as early primates in Africa with the sun coming up and the sun going down. Pre-industrialized cultures, we used to naturally get sunlight first thing in the morning, which would help reset our circadian rhythm. But even under that fairly consistent light schedule, we had quite a bit of variability. It would make sense that in our tribe, there would be some people who would go to bed early. There'd be some people that go to bed late. A lot of us would be awake in the middle of the night, watching out after each other, and that's okay. I mean, it's okay that some of us are early to bed and early to rise, and other people, would love to go to bed after midnight and sleep in until noon. The only challenge comes in is when that natural chronotype butts into school schedules, work schedules, social schedules, and interferes with your body's ability to get good, natural, healthy sleep.
I mean, but does anyone have a chronotype where they are fine to sleep all day and wake up and be up at night? Or is it, at some point I would think that regardless of your chronotype, you're going to run into some, physiological problems, like people that work overnight shifts,
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if individuals were allowed to sleep in their natural chronotype, they would by and large be fine. The problem is that that's almost impossible. Even for someone who is naturally a night owl who works overnight shifts, it is extremely challenging because the whole world works during the day. I mean, if they want to go to a doctor's appointment or take their kids, join their kids' parent-teacher conference, almost all of those happen during conventional hours, which means they have to be awake when their body really wants them to be sleeping. The other piece of it is that working overnights is incredibly socially isolating. It's often described as you're just living in a parallel universe with your family, friends, roommates, and loved ones. Because even though you're right there next to each other, you're on such a different schedule and clock. It can be depressing and isolating.
And well, from what I've heard, people working the overnight tend to have a lot of health problems. Is that because that's not their chronotype, or is it simply staying up, all night and sleeping all day just because of the light effects messes you up? I don't know.
So if you look at so you're just to go back a little bit to the research, you're absolutely right. So if you take a look at some of the best data has been in the Nurses' Health Study, which has taken care of nurses who often have to work rotating overnight shifts. And so in a group of individuals who work overnight shifts, we know that they have all sorts of various health consequences, or at higher risk of various poor health outcomes, such as obesity, diabetes, heart disease, early mortality, mood disorders, anxiety disorders, substance abuse, and suicide. So I mean, that's kind of hitting almost everything. In that group, you have some people who are naturally night owls, and this fits their body rhythm quite well. And if the rest of their life would allow them to sleep from the morning hours well into the afternoon, they probably would be fine, and I really doubt they would suffer long-term adverse health consequences. The problem is for those individuals the rest of life usually does intrude. The flip side of the coin are the individuals who are not naturally night owls, but have to be for professional reasons. And this is, when you're a junior nurse, a junior doctor, junior police officer, firefighter, you get all of the hard shifts that nobody else wants, and usually that means you end up doing overnight work, or you are just suffering financially. And as it turns out, working overnights, there's usually a premium, and so usually whether or not it's driving a bus or working in a factory overnight, usually there's a little extra money in it for you, which means that a lot of people are just financially stuck and they have to work overnights because it's the only way they can try to get by. And for those individuals, it's a real disaster because they're now constantly fighting their body's natural rhythm. They're trying to get back into a, quote, normal rhythm on the weekends, which is just long enough to essentially reset their clock back to zero, so they have to start all over again once they start their work week again.
Yeah, that's terrible.
Yeah.
I have a question, I guess kind of an unusual question. Have you studied what happens to the cells of your body when you sleep, or has anyone studied it? Like from what I've heard, the brain cells will shrink, allowing the cerebral spinal fluid to move around more freely and clear out debris. But what about your skin cells? What about your organs and every other part of you? Do you know what happens to the other parts of the body when you sleep, and is it important?
Sure. I mean, you very nicely described the idea that it is during sleep that we have lymphatic clearance, meaning the brain clears out toxins. A lot of other very interesting things happen. I'll just focus on the brain for a second, and then I'll get to the rest of the body. The brain cells also prune down connections which are not important. So as you go about your daily life, you're making all sorts of connections that are, for the most part, meaningless. For example, what you had for breakfast this morning. You may know about it. You may remember it now, but I bet you if I talked to you 2 weeks from now, you couldn't remember what you had for breakfast this morning. And that's just an example of a connection in the brain that's there right now that's going to be pruned away, and it gets pruned away when we're in slow-wave sleep, non-REM slow-wave sleep. During REM sleep, we have an amplification of emotionally salient memories, and what that means is that when you have experienced something that has an emotional intensity to it, whether or not it's joy or humiliation or anger, you're far more likely to remember that experience because emotions are your brain's way of saying, look, buddy, this is important. You need to remember this. And it is during REM sleep that your brain goes to those memories and replays them, which is why our dreams are often so full of intense emotional content. The rest of the body is absolutely receiving great benefits from a good night of sleep. A reasonable way to think about it is that every cell that is exposed to the sun goes through a natural circadian rhythm. So everything from your liver cells to brewer's yeast goes through a circadian rhythm in terms of metabolism. Different proteins will be turned on at different times of the day. This occurs in every cell in your body. It's run by a master circadian rhythm switch in your brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which just tells all of your brain cells what time of the day it is. And we know that this is clinically relevant because if you give someone a medication, for example, a cholesterol medication, an anti-cholesterol medication, if you take it at one time of the day, it works really well. If you take it at a different time of the day, it doesn't work well. And this has to do with how your liver metabolizes it and how the different tissues respond to it. Your cardiac myocytes are recharged during sleep, so rest is extremely important for your heart, even though it clearly keeps beating throughout the course of the night. Your gut tends to slow down, which is, of course, why we shouldn't be having bowel movements in the middle of the night. In general, our kidneys have antidiuretic phenomena happen at night, so you're less likely to your kidneys are still creating urine, but it's just not creating it it shouldn't be creating it nearly as much as it does during the day. So then we shouldn't have to wake up and go to the bathroom nearly so often. And so the more you look, the more you realize that every tissue type in the body is changing over the course of the night.
Okay, that's good to know. Yeah, I've also heard, cortisol, peaks in the morning, and this hormone does this and that. What happens if you don't sleep the assumed normal hours? What happens if you go to bed at 4 a.m. and get up at noon? What happens to your hormone levels? Do they just shift forward in time, or are they stuck?
Well, so one of the most important things that happens during sleep is you have a normal growth hormone secretion. So growth hormone is critically important, obviously, during development in kids. And if anybody who's ever had a child and you wake them up in the morning and you say, my goodness, this kid just grew last night, that's because they did. That's when growth hormone is secreted. That's when their bones get longer, their muscles get bigger. And as we get older, obviously we shouldn't be getting any taller, but we still have natural growth hormone secretion, which is good for our own muscles, muscle tone, glucose metabolism. And if you don't sleep, you're not getting growth hormone. Now, cortisol is secreted at pretty much the same time of day, about 4 to 5 in the morning for most people with a normal chronotype. And so even in experiments where the people are sleep deprived, they still have a cortisol surge. That's the stress hormone, and that's secreted usually about 4 to 5 o'clock in the morning. And that's probably why for over a century we've known that mortality is highest in the morning. This is when people are most likely to die of cardiovascular disease, heart attack, cardiac arrhythmias, and they're most likely to have strokes, usually in the morning.
Oh, interesting. So in your Sleep Performance Institute, what are some of the low-hanging fruit that you use to help people sleep better, and then what are some of the more advanced strategies?
Sure. Well, so first of all, is what I've realized over years of practicing sleep medicine is the piece that is almost always missed when it comes to helping somebody sleep better is their circadian rhythm. And I really appreciate, Rich, that we started this conversation talking about chronotype because it's often something that people haven't thought about very much in terms of what is their body's natural circadian rhythm and when would their body most like to naturally be sleeping. People just assume, well, I got a job working at a bank at 7 o'clock in the morning, and so I'm going to go to bed at 10, and I'm going to wake up at 5:30, and I'll just do that every day for 5 years, and I'll be fine. It doesn't work that way. You don't change your circadian rhythm by just going to bed at a certain time and waking up. It requires some degree of intention in terms of recognizing, first of all, when your body naturally would start getting sleepy at night, when it would naturally start waking up. And then you need to combine that with circadian realignment strategies, such as bright light in the morning and the use of melatonin at bed in the evening. Melatonin is commonly misperceived as a sleeping pill. It isn't. It is a circadian cue of darkness. So if you are naturally a night owl and would like to fall asleep earlier, taking a small amount of melatonin, usually less than 1 milligram, several hours before you would like to go to bed is an awfully good strategy. If you are not a night owl, if you just have other challenges with insomnia, melatonin is not going to be a good long-term strategy for you. So what we start with everyone is first getting them to recognize what their intrinsic chronotype is. And this is often a really challenging question. There's all sorts of reasons why people can mask what their natural chronotype is. Sometimes they're on medications that are sedating, and so that sedation that they take in the evening, they believe is their body naturally getting sleepy, when in fact it's one of their several medications they're on. They are unaware of how naturally sleepy they are in the morning because they're drinking so much coffee or taking some sort of other stimulant. They have other underlying sleep problems, whether or not that's sleep apnea or restless leg syndrome. Maybe they have sleepwalking. Maybe they have dream enactment. These other sleep challenges can get in the way of them understanding what their natural circadian rhythm is. So the first step is to try to figure out what your natural circadian rhythm is. Try to recognize how aligned it is with what you're trying to do. So our ultimate goal is to let you fall asleep naturally when you want to, and then wake up without an alarm clock. And you couldn't sleep any longer, even if we paid you to. And if you look at the really great sleepers, professional athletes, Olympic athletes who value this greatly, that's where they're at. They'll wake up at 8, 9 in the morning, whatever time it would be, and then you could go in and say, look, here's $10,000. Can you sleep 10 more minutes for $10,000? And if the answer is no, then they've reached kind of their peak natural sleep schedule. And then you asked about kind of other kind of advanced strategies. Well, you got to go. Anybody can have sleep. Another sleep problem. Restless legs is common, somewhere between 10 to 20% of the population. Sleep apnea. The average person walking around over the age of 40 has a little bit of sleep apnea. Which does not necessarily mean that everybody needs to have a CPAP machine, but it is worthwhile to recognize that they may have some breathing issues at night that are interfering with their ability to get a good restful night of sleep. Napping strategies. Don't forget that human beings are naturally good nappers. If sleeping under natural conditions in nature without a stimulant, people will naturally feel quite sleepy, usually in the mid-afternoon. And if your job depends, if your career and your profession depends upon you functioning at your absolute peak at 7 o'clock in the evening, a la NHL hockey players or Major League Baseball players or what have you, it's an awfully good idea to become a good napper. And becoming a good napper takes practice. A lot of people we talk to say, I've taken naps before and I wake up feeling worse than when I started, so I'm never going to do that again.
Yeah.
Well, that's because
here's my question for napping. Here's the big difficulty I have. So, take a 20-minute nap, right? Well, what if it takes me 15 minutes to fall asleep? So how do you? I would think there should be a device that would monitor you, like a specific napping app or something that would monitor you when you fall asleep. Then it starts the 20-minute timer, because how can I nap 15 or 20 minutes if I don't know how long it'll take me to fall asleep?
No, that's right. That's right. So, what the best answer is that it is that the technology out there does exist. It's quite unwieldy to actually hook people up to wires to actually be able to look at their brainwaves while they're sleeping. There are groups that are working on coming up with less cumbersome ways of doing it. A Fitbit at this point really won't do it, or a Fitbit-like device won't be able to give you that information. But here's what I tell people who are struggling with napping or who've had an experience where it didn't work particularly well, is that it takes practice. Nobody all of a sudden started doing a little bit of exercise and physical fitness and got it right away. You need to one, recognize what your body's chronotype for napping is, and everybody's a little bit different. Some people would naturally feel sleepy at about 1 in the afternoon. Some people would be 4 in the afternoon. Some people would be 11 o'clock in the morning, and you first need to find out what that naturally is. Once you've identified what that is, then it's just routine and consistency. Laying down or sitting down in a recumbent manner and closing your eyes, and just taking a little bit of practice at it. And if it's in general about a 20-minute nap, you don't want to go much longer than that once you're asleep. But it may take you 40 minutes, as you described, Rich, to fall asleep and then get 20 minutes, to ultimately fall asleep and then get 20 minutes of sleep. Once you go past 20 minutes, then what's happening is your brain is assuming that it gets to sleep for an entire sleep cycle, which lasts usually about 90 minutes. And so now your brain is really starting to go down into a deep state of sleep. And so if somebody wakes you up 40 minutes into this, you might not know what planet you're on for an hour or so until your brain ultimately wakes up. So it takes first understanding what your natural timing of napping is, then it takes practice. One strategy which can be very useful is use your body's natural drop in body temperature as a little alarm clock. So one of the first things that happens when you fall asleep is your core body temperature drops by a half a degree centigrade. Interestingly, when you go into REM sleep about an hour or so later, our body ceases to create its own internal temperature. We become ectothermic. We become dependent upon the ambient temperature, aka cold-blooded. And this happens for about 20 to 30 minutes or so during periods of REM sleep. This is interestingly, this is what, in case you ever wondered, this drop in body temperature is the reason why we sleep underneath blankets. And every terrestrial mammal does this. They either snuggle up with each other, or they burrow, or birds, obviously not mammals, they nest. The only mammals who don't do it appear to be cetaceans, which are dolphins, which don't have any REM. Their REM sleep is suppressed, and they will continuously sleep one half of their brain at a time. Anyway, so sorry about getting a little bit aside, but back to the napping strategy is, so if you just, then this is what I do personally. In the afternoon, I'll just close my eyes when I can, usually about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I'll close my eyes, turn the lights off in my office. I don't lay down completely, but I just kind of lay back in my chair. I don't cover myself up with a coat or any other blanket, and I just close my eyes until I doze off, and then my drop in body temperature will actually wake me up. So because I'll get chilly, and if any of you have ever closed your eyes and you weren't quite sure whether or not you fell asleep, but you woke up and you were chilly, you fell asleep. That's part of stage 1 sleep. One of the first things that happens is your body temperature drops. And so by just
So what would I have a burning idea in my head. So what would happen if you had a system where someone's sleeping, and every time they go into that REM cold period, I don't know, the bed heats them up or the room warms up to take them through that cycle? What do you guess would happen to somebody? Would they sleep better or worse?
I don't know the answer to that. I mean, that of course is the reason why we have blankets, so that our body temperature doesn't drop so much that we're not able to maintain homeostasis. Just as an aside, a lot of artists, creative types, love napping. Because a little bit of sleep can just put a lot of good perspective on things. It just prunes off those unnecessary connections a little bit. You can start to see the signal through the noise a little bit more. If you are working on anything from a math problem to trying to learn French, taking a little bit of nap or a little bit of sleep can just put this all into perspective for you a little bit. There's a great example. Salvador Dali, the surrealism artist, used to sleep in a chair, and he would hold a coin or a key in his fingers. And so as soon as he would fall asleep, he'd drop the key and it would land on the floor and it would wake him up. And then he would take whatever was in his head and he would start sketching it out. It was one of the ways he was able to kind of master surrealism with his dreammentation. Yeah. So
going back to sleeping, and I asked you what some of the low-hanging fruit are. Like, what I didn't hear is like blackout curtains, magnesium, white noise, a cool room, a comfortable pillow, a comfortable mattress. I guess they call it setting. Set and setting.
Yeah.
Then there's the mental part, and there's the physical part. So what? Again,
Well,
what would you think are a handful of things that would help people that are having problems sleeping?
right. Well, usually, and from my perspective, usually most people, by the time they come to see me, they've kind of tried a lot of these things already. But you're right. One should not dismiss the importance of setting the right environment. And the right environment, the three keys are light, noise, and temperature. And so, yeah, you want it dark. Obviously, you want screens out of the bedroom. Noise, white noise is fine if you find that comfortable. Some people find it irritating. The main thing is you just don't want sudden blasts of noise. You don't want cell phones going off. You don't want somebody shouting outside the bedroom. And then temperature is an interesting one because we're starting to recognize more that actually a drop in temperature in the evening can help promote sleep. And this makes a lot of sense. Again, imagine you're out sleeping in nature. What's one of the things that happens after the sun goes down is the temperature drops a little bit. And it just kind of gives a cue to your body that it's getting ready for time to start going to sleep.
All right, so what are some of the more advanced strategies that you need to implement to help people?
Well, I mean, the advanced issues are just to recognize what are the other underlying sleep challenges that they may be having. A lot of people are restless, so they're fairly convinced that they just have regular old insomnia. But once you do a deep dive into it, and you ask them, you explore with them, what are your challenges sleeping? They say, well, I'm uncomfortable. I have to roll around. I have to get up and walk around. I try to avoid using the term restless leg syndrome because I think that's too narrow. Other people will describe other forms of restlessness where they need to get up and eat. People who are cigarette smokers will often need to get up and smoke if they have this condition. It's often due to a deficient. Yeah. In fact, it's interesting because arguably the greatest public health success story in the last half century is we've taken adult smoking from about a 40% prevalence in the United States down to about 15%. Great success story, many lives saved. But ask yourself the question, what is with those final 15%? It's not like they haven't gotten the news that smoking is bad for them and it's going to kill them. It's that there's something different going on in their brain. And from our experience, many of them have restlessness, and what happens is they can use the nicotine gum and they can avoid smoking all day long, but when they go to bed, they are not able to fall asleep until they have a cigarette. And I don't care who you are, good luck trying to quit smoking if you are not able to fall asleep without having a cigarette. It's just not going to happen unless you recognize that there's a restlessness component to this, and usually this means there's a deficiency of the neurotransmitter dopamine in the brain, which is a rate-limiting step in the creation of dopamine. Is an enzyme called tyrosine hydroxylase. A critical cofactor in that is iron. So if you are iron deficient in your brain, you will not create enough dopamine, and this can often lead to quite a bit of restlessness. This is one of the reasons why otherwise healthy young premenopausal women who are iron deficient from menstrual blood loss have so much restless leg symptoms interfering with their ability to fall asleep. And so in addition to having to get up and walk around, they'll say, I just need this overwhelming urge, I need to get up and eat something, or they need to get up and do something else. That is a different animal than somebody who's struggling with a chronotype that doesn't match up particularly well. And that needs to be addressed. Ideally, it would be just addressed with iron replacement, but it's actually challenging replacing iron just orally. Sometimes it needs iron infusions. And then considering how common sleep apnea is the collapse of the upper airway during sleep. It's more common in men until women go through menopause, and then the incidence of sleep apnea is awfully similar between men and women after menopause. And if you're not breathing well at night, clearly you're not going to wake up and you're not going to be well rested. Conventionally, the strategy for treating obstructive sleep apnea has been CPAP, which is a mask that goes over the nose. It blows room air, no added oxygen, and just acts as a pneumatic splint to keep the airway open, which is great when people are able to use it. I mean, about 95% of the time it'll solve the sleep apnea, but only about 50% of the time people are able to tolerate it. What's the reason why? Well, some people have claustrophobia. They don't like the way it feels on your face. I mean, there's all sorts of various reasons. Sometimes we can help people get through them. Sometimes we can't. But it's important to realize that there are other treatment options besides CPAP. In particular, there are dental appliances that look a lot like athletic mouth guards that people just wear at night. That's an awfully good treatment for obstructive sleep apnea. Sometimes it's just sleeping on your side, propping yourself up at night. There are surgeries that are useful for sleep apnea, those sorts of things.
So if someone has a problem with their sleep, and it sounds like there's myriad potential things that could be going on, what do they do? Should they, I guess, try, quote unquote, home remedies and basic things, and then eventually go for a sleep study or go see a sleep doctor? I mean, what's the path people tend to take?
Well, I mean, people try all sorts of things. As the guiding principle should be for anyone, and I don't care whether or not that's someone who just listens to us on a podcast, whether or not they use our mobile application, whether or not they hear us talk or they see me in clinic. The most important thing is to first understand the reason why you're struggling with sleep. And the answer, and I would ask everybody just to give us about 30 minutes to kind of, with an open mind, to consider all options. Because most people kind of assume they understand the reason why they can't fall asleep, but maybe it's a chronotype issue that they didn't realize. Maybe they're restless and they didn't realize. Maybe there's a little bit of breathing issue that they didn't know about. The more important than doing anything is first understanding what the reason is that you're struggling with sleep. And as a general principle, the first place to start, the foundation for healthy sleep, is a healthy circadian rhythm. And so we nearly universally always start right there.
Any techniques for figuring out what your circadian rhythm should be? I mean, like test sleeping and waking at different times. I mean, how would you figure this out?
Yeah, I mean, there are melatonin assays that people can take at different times of the day. They tend to be fairly labor intensive. Most people can figure out what their natural circadian rhythm is with the following scenario, which is, we refer to it as the Hawaii scenario or the Tahiti scenario. Whatever it is, Rich, is what I would say is, imagine that I gave you a winning lottery ticket and I sent you away, and the only catch is I had to send you away to Hawaii or some other paradise for 90 days. And everything in your life that you're normally worried about is taken care of. The kids are taken care of, work is taken care of, everything. And the only thing I asked you to do is just avoid caffeine, avoid alcohol, and just fall asleep when you naturally felt like it and wake up when you're done. And that means, and don't tell me this, and we often need to clarify, don't tell me what you want your natural sleep rhythm to be, Rich. Tell me what it is. So if the whole world would let you, go to bed at 2 o'clock in the morning and then wake up at 10, is that what it would be? Or maybe some people are the opposite. Some people, if the whole world would let them, they'd go to bed earlier at 7 and they'd wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning. And then you need to tease out, like, are they on any sedating medications? Are they on how much does alcohol play a role here? How does caffeine and stimulants play a role? But most people are able to get a pretty good handle on, once they kind of look at it that way. Oh yeah, I'd probably fall asleep at this time and I'd wake up at this time and then I'd nap there. And so if you're the kind of person out there who is on a sleeping pill of some sort or another, and I don't care if it's a sleeping pill prescription like Zolpidem, which is Ambien, or if you're on a sedating antidepressant such as mirtazapine, which is Remeron, or if you're taking an over-the-counter agent, or if you're taking an herbal supplement to help you sleep. I don't care what it is, But if that describes you at all, and when that alarm clock goes off in the morning and you could sleep a heck of a lot longer, an hour, 2 hours longer, your problem, your first item, your first issue on the agenda is to realign your circadian rhythm, because your brain is clearly capable of sleeping. It's just trying to do it at the wrong time. So one way to say is like, let's take that sleepiness you feel in the morning and let's pay it forward so that you naturally start getting sleepier in the evening.
Okay. All right. Makes sense. You mentioned an app as you were talking. So I don't want to call it your bag of tricks, but what's in your arsenal to help people when they come to you specifically?
Well, this is for the Sleep Performance Institute. We're developing a web-based application which actually can help people better understand their natural circadian rhythm. So there's thought experiments, kind of like what we just described. But in addition to that, a mobile application can actually, especially if it's combined with a wrist-based device like a Fitbit or an Apple Watch, can actually help you better understand your circadian rhythm than you do. Anything from what time are you on your phone, what time do you turn it on in the morning, what time are you, and then another important piece of it which we haven't talked about, which is in addition to your sleep having a natural 24-hour rhythm, your appetite does as well. So one of the signs of healthy sleep is after you wake up in the morning, if you put food in your stomach, it should feel normal. You should actually start feeling hungry within an hour or so of waking up in the morning. And if you're not, that actually means that your gut hasn't woken up yet.
Oh, so if you're someone that says, "Oh, I never eat breakfast," and
yep,
you do eat breakfast, you feel like, well, that's because your stomach hasn't woken up.
That is often exactly the case. So that same person who says they never eat breakfast often is up late, has a horrible time waking up in the morning, and it often has other consequences from that, including weight gain. They're not able to exercise effectively, and they're struggling in other aspects of their life as well.
Well, it sounds like there's a rhythm. I mean, there's no news to anybody, but I guess a good refresher. It sounds like there's a rhythm to everything. And if you respect your rhythms and what feels right to you, sleep will be better, eating will be better, everything. And if you don't, and you try to just push past it, it's going to cascade into all sorts of other problems.
I think that's right on, Rich. We human beings are not computers. You cannot just put us into sleep mode because that is the time when it's most convenient to us. Our bodies have rhythms, and they are linked in with nature. And the more we fight back against it, the more problems it causes.
Okay, makes sense. So, I know you can't help everybody, but for the people that are within your sphere, where are you located, and how can they find out more from you? And then if you can't specifically help them, what resources do you have to help them?
Sure. So the company is the Sleep Performance Institute. We work with organizations, anything from corporations, municipalities, teachers unions to professional sports teams. We're based out of Minneapolis, Minnesota, but we're developing a web-based platform that can reach out to anyone in the English-speaking world, and then ultimately we'd like to make this multilingual. And the best place to find us is just on our website, sleepperformanceinstitute.com.
Okay, very good. Well, I know we could talk about a lot more, but we're out of time, and I think we got some really good info in. So I appreciate you coming on the podcast.
Well, thank you much, Rich. I wish you the best and sleep well.
Thanks.
You're listening to the Future Tech Health Podcast with Richard Jacobs. Until I reached age 40, I never realized the obvious, that we all have medical issues, or we at least have a family member or close relation that has, or will have them in the future. Medicine and biological systems are the final frontier. Until we've conquered death, figured out how life began, cured cancer, and understood our purpose in the universe, there's a heck of a lot to talk about when it comes to our health. Future Tech Health means I'll be covering futuristic topics that are actually already in clinical trials, or even starting to appear on shelves or by prescription, or available for your own use. We dive deep into stem cells, CRISPR-Cas9, the science of sleep, epigenetics, medical testing, cancer, ketogenic diets, stem cells, aging, regenerative medicine, and more. My goal for you, the listener, is to learn from these podcasts. You may very well learn something that may change the course of your life for the better, steer you towards a new career, or give you insight into addressing a serious medical problem. Remember, however, this podcast and its content is informational in nature only. No medical, tax, legal, financial, or psychological advice is being given. If you enjoyed the podcast, please listen, subscribe, like, and share it with friends. Thank you.